Hello, my name is Carolina Villarroel, and I'm the Director of Research of the Recovering the U.S. Hispanic Literary Heritage Program and co-founder of USLDH, U.S. Latino Digital Humanities Center, located both at the University of Houston. It is my pleasure to be part of the Lausanne Law Conference 2022. And the title of my presentation today is Latina, Latino, Latinx Perspectives in the Digital Archive. Understanding that decolonization is, as Sylvia Rivera Cusicanqui today calls, a collective endeavor, and that only a collective effort will bring the necessary resources to achieve the ambitious dream of collecting and preserving the documentary history of Latinos and Latinas in the US. 31 years ago, a group of scholars from different universities and fields under the leadership of Nicolás Canelos founded the Recovering the US Hispanic Literary Heritage Program. The goal of the program was to locate, preserve, and make available the written legacy of Latinas and Latinos in the US from colonial times until 1960, now extended until 1980. The nonprofit program was conceived under the umbrella of Arte Público Press, the oldest and most prestigious editorial house for Latinas and Latinos in the US, located at the University of Houston. Latinos and Latinas have been an integral part of this territory even before it was the United States. Since colonial times, from 16th century explorations and settlements, the US territory has been a destination for colonization by European countries, Spain, France, and Great Britain, and later for political exiles and immigrants from all Latin America and Spain. All of them have contributed to the culture of the United States, although a big part of this documentary legacy has been lost or is subject to recovery. As Nicolás Canelos states, during nearly 2 centuries of anti-Hispanic propaganda and the creation of stereotypes and negative images in popular culture, it is no wonder that so much has been lost of our cultural history in the United States. The task then was to locate what had not been actively collected by the institutional archive, but that had been in and out of the privileged space that housed our common history, or is supposed to house our common history. Rodrigo Lasso, board member and recovery scholar, calls this a migrant archive, one that lives in various spaces depending on the wishes of the donors, and that is always in a race against time, trying to preserve the always imperiled documentary history in languages other than English. The neglected intellectual and cultural legacy, mostly written in Spanish, amounts today to hundreds of newspapers, thousands of books, published and unpublished manuscripts, memoirs, correspondence, etc. Since its creation in 1991, Recovery has grown its community of scholars, students, and community partnerships to hundreds around the United States and abroad interested in contributions of a population that now make up the largest minority group in the United States. Since its inception, Recovery has also become somewhat of a sub-discipline in Spanish, English, American Studies, History, and Ethnic Studies. Understanding the community's needs and distrust of the official institutions that have not deemed their cultural legacy important enough to be preserved, as is the case with many underrepresented communities, Recovery has worked since its beginnings under the model that is now called post-custodial, working hand in hand when possible with owners of collections to preserve historical materials. Recovery team members arrange collection, create metadata and digital surrogates to then in turn return the owners the collections along with digital copies. In the process, the program also encourages donors to contribute descriptions and narratives about the collections, providing context and humanity to the physical and digital artifacts. The program also advocates for owners of collections to consider donating the originals to archival repositories, not only for preservation purposes, but also for representation. For Recovery scholars, these collections are more than just a collection of materials to serve academic purposes. They are an opportunity for healing and reconciliation with our past and history, a process to learn to value the overlooked importance of our contributions to this country's cultural legacy, and a way to pass these counter narratives, their narratives, to future generations. As of today, Recovery has preserved thousands of historical materials, mainly in Spanish, 85%, but also in English, French, and Ladino, has provided funding for research, 189 grants and counting, created an interdisciplinary board of specialists that represents the diversity of the materials from diverse fields such as history, religion, women's studies, archives, literature, etc. Published the first comprehensive anthology of Latino literature in 2002 with Oxford University Press and a companion in Spanish with Arte Público Press. Built databases and bibliographies, microfilm and digitized historical documents, held a biannual conference that is now in his 10th iteration, printed around 40 volumes of recovering work, underwrote the microfilming of various Latinos collections from New York to Los Angeles, and built partnerships with institutions abroad who might have or might be missing parts of their own documentary history and whose legacy is intertwined with the US, such as Cuba, Mexico, Puerto Rico, etc. Recovery collections. Newspapers. Part of the work through the years has been the creation of a comprehensive bibliography of more than 20,000 records of printed materials that includes broadsides, maps, cookbooks, memoirs, poetry, historical accounts, anthropology, grammar teaching volumes, treatises, religious volumes, etc. Currently, Recovery has one of the largest collections of Spanish language periodicals published in the United States before 1960. The collection of more than 1,400 titles includes the first newspaper published in Spanish in US territory, at Mississippi, published in New Orleans in 1808. The first newspaper published in Texas, La Gaceta de Texas, published in Nacogdoches, Texas in 1813. And Feminismo Internacional, or International Feminism, published in New York in 1923 by Mexican exile and feminist Elena Arizmendi. The collection also includes bilingual and trilingual newspapers, newspapers in Ladino, and a collection of more than 100 anarchist newspapers. Collections. Recovery has all received collections that document not only the daily life of Latinas and Latinos in the US, but that also speak of leadership and intellectual life, and the history of many firsts through the country's history. Collections are welcome and incorporated, processed and digitized, and later returned to owners or moved to the archives at the University of Houston, our archival partners. Perhaps one of the collection's most illustrative of the recovery process, and that also speaks of the transnational nature of many of the recovery collections, is the Leonor Villegas de Magnon papers. Villegas de Magnon, or how she called herself, the Rebel, was a Mexican woman living in Laredo, Texas, who by the time of the Mexican Revolution sided with the constitutionalist General Venustiano Carranza, who later became the president of Mexico. The Rebel, along with Mexican American, and Anglo women, founded the White Cross, a group of nurses whose work was to tend to the wounded, but who also served as spies and political allies. What is outstanding, considering how scarce public spaces were for women at that time, is the fact that Villegas de Magnon took ownership of her place in history and hired a photographer to follow her and document her perspective of the revolution. But at the end of the conflict, she realized that women were excluded not only of the political process of the creation of the new nation, but also from the historical account. So she decided to write her memoirs. After trying unsuccessfully to publish it in Mexico, she rewrote it in English and tried for years to have it published in the United States. By the third generation of Leonor, our colleague and board member, Dr. Clara Lomas, found a lead of the memoir in a piece of newspaper in Laredo. The whole run of the newspaper was in an archival institution in the Netherlands. From the Netherlands, the newspaper sent her back to Laredo, where a family member shared with her that the collection was in the hands of Leonor's granddaughter in Houston, Texas. The program was then able to connect with the family, and the family was ecstatic of finally being able to fulfill Leonor's wishes of publishing her memoirs. Arte Público published both manuscripts, the Spanish version in conjunction with the National Institute of Anthropology and History in Mexico. The collection was digitized and has been the object of many scholarly publications, exhibits, and recently the topic of a bilingual digital exhibit called Entre Balas y Rugidos, created by our colleague and Houston Community College, Melinda Mejia. Collections at Recovery also include religious thought, history of Texas, women, political and diplomatic documents, and so much more. Recovery makes these collections available through the program's archive, the University of Houston archive, OCLC WorkAt, EBSCO Newsbank, and through digital projects available through our website. USLDH, Digital Humanities. Digital Humanities has become a tool to further the work of recovery and its scholars. My colleague, Dr. Gabriela Baeza Ventura, and myself realized early on that the program has been doing digital humanities work for a long time. And the tools that provided, the tools provided by the field could benefit recovery's work in terms of visibility and as a way to present the archives and the right work in an innovative way. With support from the Andrew Mellon Foundation, we were able to develop USLDH, the first US Latino Digital Humanities Center based on the Recovery Archive. We also understood that there was a need in our community to learn the ways of the digital humanities. Community understood as students, scholars, and community members at large. As a way to further the work of recovery, we set ourselves to find this community, meeting with people in our university, traveling to DH centers and researching and reaching out to colleagues that were already working on projects. The result was a crowdsourced list of projects that, as of today, has documented more than 130 projects. We also created a crowdsourced list for DH Latinx scholars to highlight our talents and provide with the information to institutions and scholars interested in training, speakers, and specialists in different areas. Along the way, we incorporated our colleagues, Dr. Lorena Gautreaux and Dr. Linda Garcia Merchant, consolidating the USLDH team. Since the initial grant, USLDH has provided training, grants in aid with our own method of work with grantees that involves training, consulting, and support, created a DH community, presented in conferences around the world, and consolidated partnerships with other institutions in the US and abroad. USLDH has created many projects, including maps, visualizations, curated digital exhibits, timelines, etc. Some of the projects include printed pathways in US Latino periodicals, a comprehensive authority list that contains robust bibliographic information about US Latino authors and poets who publish in US Latino periodicals. The project is based on a data set initiated more than 25 years ago that by the time of the development of the digital project had more than 5,000 records. The project manager was Isis Campos, a former research assistant and now a colleague in the field of Latino studies. This project was conceived not only to provide information to scholars and the general public, but to also visually counter the official record that renders invisible the intellectual contributions of Latinas and Latinos in the US. LULAC Timeline. This is a collaboration with LULAC 16 Houston and National LULAC, who provided scholarships for undergraduate students to help on the creation of a digital timeline using Timeline.js that will document the rich history of the organization. The digital timeline highlights key moments for the nation's oldest Latino civil rights organization. The project lives on our website and LULAC's national website. This partnership arises from an initial pop-up exhibit, an event where USLDH presented a digital project based on Alonso Esperales, founder of LULAC. Datasets. Since the beginning of the recovery project, a system was set in place to capture literature in a broad sense, published in newspapers. The workflow included research assistance, indexing content from the newspapers, and the creation of metadata that later was translated into a database. Throughout the years, the database accumulated thousands of records recording editorials, essays, serialized fiction, poetry, wit and humor, literary news, etc. Based on this database, USLDH has created 3 datasets, the first of which will be released this month and it includes editorials for more than 300 newspapers. The metadata includes newspaper information, author information, language, subject headings in English and Spanish, genre, gender, etc. In the coming months, the program will release 2 more datasets, women's writings and religion. Scrapbooks. Students are currently working on locating the appropriate software to present 2 scrapbooks donated by community members in Houston, Texas. The task was to locate a software that will convey the uniqueness of the scrapbook and that would allow to add dimensionality so the audience can experience the artifact in the closest way possible to the original. The final project would include voice functionality to allow the family member to remember and narrate their family history through the software. The project draws inspiration from Sylvia Rivera Cusicanqui's The Colonial Theory of Gestures that help us decenter the gaze, involving the whole body in the process of gazing, allowing a path to empathy and understanding. Periodicals in the US-Mexico border region. In 2021, Recovery received a grant from the CLEAR initiative, Digitizing Hidden Special Collections and Archives, to digitize, create metadata, and make public in an open source platform a collection of 200 Spanish language newspapers published along the US-Mexico border region. The newspapers range from 1850 to 1956 and incorporate publications from Brownsville, Texas to San Diego, California, and the northern Mexican states of Coahuila and Tamaulipas. Most of the periodicals have never been accessible to scholars and most comprise the only extant copies. The newspapers are important especially for scholars in border studies, international relations, political science, history, literature, Mexican American Latino studies, and women's studies. Education. An important part of the project is its commitment to education. Since its beginning, Recovery has partnered with departments at the University of Houston and now other universities to hire graduate students from Hispanic studies, history, creative writing, art history, social work, etc. Students receive training in archival processes, metadata creation, and digital humanities. The students also have the opportunity to create content through blogs, translations, and collections descriptions. Each student comes to the program with a particular set of skills. Our goal is to guide them to help them capitalize on them and to give them opportunities for growth. Students participate in the development of digital projects and their contributions are recognized in each project. This way, they can cite and refer to their work. The program also works with undergraduate students in the same way, giving them a space for discovery and learning and guiding them through the process. Being a part of this program, I can attest to its value. Because of the training I received at Recovery, I became an archivist and worked at the Houston Metropolitan Research Center to later come back to the program as director of research. But our commitment to education goes beyond college. We work each year with an initiative from CERT-Jobs and Bank of America, and we bring high school students during the summer to work on digital projects based on the archive. This program has proven transformational for the students, who first become amazed and shocked by this unknown history that belongs to them, but was never taught to them in school. As a result, they become engaged and committed to work on these projects as a way to respond to the colonial system that has denied them their history. Last year, along with my colleague, Dr. Gabriela Baeza Ventura, and with funding from LULAC 60, we designed a project to bring digital tools and Latino history to an elementary school in a predominantly Latino neighborhood. The project is designed to bring the archive to the students so they can see themselves in history and value their ancestors' contributions to this country. The students will create a digital timeline using Timeline.js, where they will include Latino leaders alongside mainstream figures. The project will also encourage students to include the history of their own families in the same timeline. Throughout Recovery and USLDH work, the program has developed strong and fruitful ties with the community of scholars, community of students, and community at large. These partnerships are based in respect and the generosity of both parts, understanding that working together, we can better preserve and understand our past and make available narratives to counter the official narrative that erase our history. I invite you to follow and support our community's work. Learn more about the rich legacy and contributions of Latinos and Latinos in the US, and to learn about our guiding principles of community engagement and respect reflected in our best practices. You can find our best practices in our website. I leave with a quote from Cherry Moraga and Gloria Anzaldúa. Before turning our eyes forward, let's cast a look at the roads that led us here. The paths we have traveled, the paths that we're traveled on have been rocky and thorny, and no doubt they will continue to be so. But instead of the rocks and the thorns, we want to concentrate on the rain and the sunlight and the spiderwebs glistening on both. Gracias.